The father who never brought them home, John Skelton, finally charged. Before we dive in, kindly hit the subscribe button and let us know where you are watching from in the comment. The night was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes a parent uneasy, the kind of quiet that gnaws at the edges of your mind. It was Thanksgiving weekend in Morenci, Michigan, a small town, peaceful town, a place where people didn't lock their doors, a place where kids rode their bikes until sunset and neighbors waved from across their lawns. But that peace shattered forever on November 26, 2010. 3 young boys vanished. Brothers, best friends. Andrew, age 9, Alexander, age 7, and little Tanner, age 5. 3 sons who should have come home. 3 sons who never did. The day began like any other holiday exchange. The boys were spending Thanksgiving with their father, John Skelton. He was separated from their mother, Tanya. Their marriage had collapsed under arguments, accusations, and long nights of tension. Custody had become a battlefield, and the boys were trapped in the center of it, like tiny soldiers in a war they never chose. Still, it was the holidays, and Tanya believed in giving them space with their father. She believed he loved them. She believed at least that he would keep them safe. She didn't know that this Thanksgiving would be the last time she would ever see her children. Let's go back to that moment. Picture Tanya sitting at home, waiting for her boys to return. She cleaned the living room. She reheated leftovers. She folded their tiny clothes, imagining the chaos that would fill the house when they stormed in, laughing, yelling, running. But the hours passed, and the boys didn't return. Her phone didn't ring. Her heart sank. Something wasn't right. She tried to call John. No answer. She tried again. Nothing. Minutes turned into an hour. Then 2. Then 3. Fear crawled up her spine. She knew their father. She knew his moods. She knew he was unpredictable. And she knew, deep down, something terrible had happened. She got in her car and drove straight to his house. When she arrived, the house looked normal. Too normal. Lights off. Curtains drawn. No toys scattered on the porch. No sign of 3 energetic boys living their best lives. She knocked on the door. No answer. She pounded harder. Still nothing. She yelled their names. Andrew. Alexander. Tanner. Silence. Her stomach twisted. She went around the house, checking windows. She tried the back door. Locked. Her hands shook as she grabbed her phone. She dialed 911, and with that call, a nightmare began. Police arrived quickly. They forced their way inside the house, and what they found was chilling. The house was empty, completely empty. No children, no toys, no laughter, no sign that 3 boys had ever been there. Just a quiet house with a dark secret. But there was something else, something even worse. They found John Skelton, alone. He wasn't looking for his children. He wasn't frantic or pacing or desperate. He was lying, and he was lying badly. He told police the boys were safe. He said he had given them to a mysterious organization to protect them from their mother. An organization he refused to name. One no one had ever heard of. One that didn't exist. His statements were vague, contradictory, bizarre. He said they were safe. Then he said he didn't know where they were. Then he said he couldn't bring them back. Then he said he wouldn't bring them back. Detectives realized something quickly. This wasn't a custody dispute. This was a crime. Let's pause, because this is where the story begins to darken. This is where we start to see the cracks in John's mind. The obsession, the fear, the paranoia, the anger. This is where we see a father unraveling. Because weeks before the boys vanished, something changed in John. He started ranting about losing custody. He started accusing Tanya of things that weren't true. He believed everyone was against him. He told people he'd never let her take them. He told friends he had a plan. And on Thanksgiving weekend, he acted on it. Investigators kept questioning him. Where are your boys? Who has them? What organization? What did you do? But John didn't break. He spoke in circles. He smiled. He made wild claims. He contradicted himself. He said the children were alive. Then he suggested they weren't. Then he blamed God. Then he blamed Tanya. Then he blamed the police. But the truth was simple. He was the last person to see them, and he refused to say where they were. The search for the boys exploded across Michigan and Ohio. National media got involved. Volunteers flooded small towns. They searched fields, woods, rivers, abandoned buildings, drainage pipes, and farmland. People brought flashlights, drones, backpacks, dogs, and hope. So much hope, because 3 little boys were missing. 3 brothers. 3 innocent souls who could be anywhere. The search lasted days, then weeks, then months. But no bodies were found. No remains. No clothes. No toys. No backpacks. No trace of them. It was like the boys had vanished into thin air. Except they didn't. Someone knew exactly where they were. And that someone was sitting in a jail cell. As the investigation deepened, more disturbing details surfaced. Hours before the boys disappeared, neighbors saw the children playing outside, laughing, chasing each other, completely unaware of their father's growing darkness. Later that evening, witnesses heard strange noises from the house. Metal, dragging, movement. Then, in the early hours of the morning, someone saw a minivan driving through town. John's van, moving slowly, very slowly, stopping in places that made no sense. Starting again, stopping again, like someone was disposing of something, or someone. Police eventually found John's van abandoned. Inside were scuff marks, scratches, and signs the boys had been inside. That's when investigators knew this was no parental abduction. This was no custody stunt. This was something darker, something irreversible. They also discovered that John had attempted suicide shortly after the boys disappeared. He had tried to hang himself. He survived, but the boys were gone. When confronted, John repeated the same line. "They're safe, but you'll never find them." The detective leaned in and said the words no parent ever wants to hear. "John, what did you do?" John looked back with cold, empty eyes. No tears, no fear, no regret, just silence. And then, after hours of interrogation, he said something unexpected, something chilling. "I gave them away, to keep them safe. From their mother." He was lying. Everyone knew it. Even he knew it. But that line became his shield, his script, his excuse. For years, he repeated it. "I gave them away. They're with a group. They're safe. They're not dead." But when police asked for names, he had none. When police asked for the group, he had nothing. When police asked where they were, he said he didn't know. His story fell apart. His lies collapsed. And the world realized the truth. The boys were gone. And John was responsible. Back in Tanya's home, their rooms remained untouched. Their clothes still folded. Their toys still in place. Their shoes by the door. Waiting. Always waiting. She turned on the porch light every night. Just in case her sons walked home. Just in case they needed light. People in town left their porch lights on, too. For months. Then years. A small symbol of hope. A dim beacon in a dark world. The community rallied around Tanya. But grief consumed her. Her nights were long. Her mornings were empty. She said she felt like her soul had been ripped out of her body. She said she woke up every day hoping it was a dream. She said she begged God to bring them back. The night before the boys vanished was cold. A sharp Michigan cold. The kind that bites your fingertips. The kind that moves through the walls. The kind that makes everything feel heavier. Inside the small yellow house on East Main Street, the lights were dim. The curtains were closed. The furniture was out of place. And something felt off. Very off. People who later walked through that home said it felt like walking into a nightmare frozen in time. Like someone had pressed pause on something terrible. Something violent. Something secret. Because that house was more than a home. It was the last place Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner Skelton were ever seen alive. And on that night, their father, John Skelton, was unraveling. Earlier that day, the boys had been laughing, running around the neighborhood, riding bikes, kicking leaves, just being kids. No one suspected what was coming. Not their friends, not the neighbors, not their mother, not even the boys themselves. They went back to their father's house like they had done so many times before. Backpacks, jackets, toys, smiles. They trusted him. They loved him. They had no reason not to. But trust can be deadly. Inside the house, John's mental state was spiraling. Witnesses later said he wasn't himself. He had been paranoid for weeks, nervous, jumpy, agitated. His marriage to Tanya had collapsed in flames. He believed she was out to destroy him. He believed the courts were against him. He believed the whole world wanted to take his children. He felt cornered, and a man who feels cornered can become dangerous. Very dangerous. Let's step inside his mind for a moment. Imagine sitting alone at your kitchen table, hands shaking, heart pounding, thoughts racing like a storm. You're losing everything. Your marriage, your home, your children. You feel powerless. And then the darkest thought creeps in. If I can't have them, no one will. That thought took root in John. It grew, twisted. It shaped his final decision. That night, something inside him snapped. The boys ate dinner around 6 p.m. Nothing unusual. Chicken, mac and cheese, juice boxes. They watched cartoons. They played on the floor. They teased each other. They asked their dad if they could stay up a bit later. Normal life, normal kids, normal happiness. But behind that happiness was a father whose eyes no longer saw clearly. A father with a plan. A plan no one could understand. A plan no one could stop. Around 7:30 p.m., John started acting strange. He picked up a phone, dialed a number, hung up, dialed again, hung up again. He paced slowly around the house. He opened the front door, closed it, opened it again. He looked out the windows as if expecting someone who never came. Then he walked down the hallway and stared at his 3 sons. Just stared. Witnesses later said he looked hollow, emotionless, like a man who had already made a terrifying decision. At 9 p.m., neighbors heard something, a thump, a noise, a sound they could never forget. Some said it sounded like furniture moving. Others said it sounded like a struggle. Most brushed it off. People in small towns don't assume the worst. They assume life is simple, safe, predictable. But that simplicity shattered that night. Because inside that house, something was happening. Something dark. Something irreversible. At 9:30 p.m., John logged onto Facebook. His posts were strange, rambling, desperate. He talked about protecting his children, talked about danger, talked about needing forgiveness. One line stood out. The boys are better off where they are going. People ignored it. They didn't know what he meant. They didn't know this was a warning. Farewell. A confession hidden in plain sight. Shortly after 10 p.m., something changed in the house. Something big. Something loud. Neighbors heard more noises. Dragging. Movement. Metal hitting metal. But again, no one called police. No one knocked on the door. No one thought children were in danger. And in that silence, something terrible occurred. Around midnight, John loaded something into his minivan. One neighbor saw him. He was moving slowly, very slowly, like the weight of the world was in his hands. But the neighbor didn't see the boys, didn't hear the boys, didn't realize that this was the last time anyone would ever see them. Because the boys were no longer running, no longer laughing, no longer playing. Something had happened, something only John knew. At 1 a.m., John drove away. His headlights cut through the empty streets. His van rolled past houses asleep in their holiday peace. No one knew they were watching a father disappear into the night. He drove for hours. Back roads, side roads, abandoned areas, strange locations. Police later traced the path using cell phone pings. It didn't make sense. He doubled back multiple times, stopped in odd areas, drove to secluded spots. Experts believe he was disposing of evidence, or remains, or memories. No one knows for sure, because John never said. He never admitted anything, but the evidence was everywhere. In his van, on his shoes, in the fibers, in the timelines, in the silence. At 4 a.m., John returned home, alone, cold, exhausted. The boys were gone, and he knew it. He stepped inside the empty house, sat on his couch, and waited for sunrise, waited for police, waited for the consequences of his actions. People later said he wasn't crying. He wasn't panicked. He wasn't even shocked. He was calm, too calm, like someone who believed he had done the right thing, or convinced himself he did. At 7 a.m., Tanya woke up. She expected her phone to buzz, or the doorbell to ring, or 3 little boys to come running inside with messy hair and big smiles. But none of that happened. She texted John. No response. She called him. Nothing. She tried again. Nothing. Her heart tightened. She knew something was wrong. She grabbed her keys and rushed out. At 9 a.m., she arrived at John's house. Knocked. Called their names. Pounded harder. No answer. Then something inside her broke. Something primal. Something instinctive. She screamed their names. Cried out for them. Begged them to answer. But the silence was suffocating. She called 911, and the nightmare began. Police arrived and entered the house. They searched every room, every closet, every corner. It was empty, deceptively clean, eerily silent. Inside, physical chaos and emotional devastation collided. Beds unmade, toys missing, curtains drawn, the air heavy. No signs of life, no signs of struggle, no signs of children. But there was one thing that stood out, the feeling that something terrible had happened there. Then they found John, alone, detached, almost relaxed. He told police he had taken the boys away, given them to a group, a mysterious organization. But the more he talked, the more obvious it became. He was lying. He had no names, no details, no proof, nothing real. Detectives pressed him harder. Where are the boys? Who has them? What did you do? But he kept repeating the same line. They're safe. Police knew the truth. Everyone knew the truth. But without bodies, there was no murder charge. Not yet. Investigators began reconstructing the night. Step by step, hour by hour. They found inconsistencies in John's story. They found strange behavior. They found odd movements on his phone. They found lies layered on lies. They searched his van, found fibers, found marks, found signs of distress, but nothing that could fully prove the boy's fate. And that made everything worse, because uncertainty is torture, especially when children are involved. Days turned into weeks. For more chilling true crime stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Morning came with a siren, a cold Michigan siren that echoed down Main Street, slicing through the quiet like a blade. Police cars swarmed John Skelton's home. Neighbors peeked from windows. Reporters started circling. Rumors spread like wildfire. 3 boys missing. 3 brothers. All under 10. No trace. No explanation. No hope. And standing in the middle of it all was one man. Their father. Calm. Detached. Emotionless. John Skelton. Detective Ray Wallace was the first to approach him. A seasoned investigator. Sharp eyes. Steady voice. Nothing rattled him. But the moment he walked into that house, he felt something shift. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. The air felt heavy, like the walls were holding secrets. Dark secrets. He studied John. The trembling hands. The blank stare. The forced calmness trying to hide a storm. "Where are your boys, John?" Wallace asked. John blinked, paused, then delivered the first of many lies. "They're safe." Wallace felt a chill, because people who say they're safe are almost always covering up the opposite. Within hours, a multi-agency search began. Local police, FBI, state troopers, K-9 units, volunteers. Everyone wanted to help. Everyone wanted to find the boys. Everyone wanted this nightmare to end. But the deeper the investigation went, the stranger everything became. Because nothing about John's story made sense. Not one detail, not one sentence, Not one moment. His lies didn't just fall apart. They exploded. The first lie came early. "I gave them to a group," John said. "What group?" detectives asked. "A group that helps children." "What's the name?" "I can't say." "What do they look like?" "I don't remember." "Where did you meet them?" "Somewhere." The detectives stared at him. Somewhere? A mysterious group? No names? No numbers? No addresses? The story was collapsing before it even began. Then John changed the story. "There with a woman," he said. "What woman?" "She goes by Geraldine." Detectives exchanged glances. "Geraldine who? Geraldine where? What's her last name?" Wallace asked. "I don't know." "What does she look like?" "I can't say." "Where did you meet her?" "Online." It was falling apart fast. And then came the detail that made detectives lean in. "What website did you meet her on?" "A religious one." "What's the site's name?" "I can't remember." In the interrogation room, silence fell like a hammer. They knew John wasn't just lying. He was creating a world of fiction, a world to hide the truth. And every time he talked, he dug himself deeper. But detectives weren't relying on his stories. They had something stronger: evidence. They pulled records, phone logs, email accounts, search histories, cell tower data, vehicle GPS receipts, bank activity. And that's when the lies truly began to shatter. Because the data told a completely different story than John's mouth. Phone records showed that John hadn't spoken to any unknown groups. Not to anyone named Geraldine. Not to any organization. Not to any church. Not to any other adult at all. His call history was empty. Suspiciously empty. He had erased things. Deleted messages. Wiped logs. But not everything can be erased. Not digital footprints. Not entirely. And what investigators found was clear. John never contacted anyone. He never met anyone. He never arranged for the boys to be taken. He was alone. Completely alone. Next, detectives pulled up cell tower data. Where was John that night? Where did he drive? Where did he stop? The map that appeared on the screen made investigators go still. Because John had driven an erratic, disturbing route. Back roads, rural areas, empty fields, abandoned lots, riverside dirt paths. He stopped for long stretches in isolated areas. He doubled back multiple times. He traveled with no clear destination. It wasn't the path of a father protecting his children. It was the path of someone disposing of something. Or someone. Detectives stared at the map. No patterns. No logic. No sense. But one thing stood out. Every area he stopped was remote. Secluded. Hidden. Perfect for hiding evidence. Perfect for burying secrets. Then came the van. John's blue minivan was the key. If the boys were transported, the van would tell the story. They tore it apart. Every carpet, every panel, every fiber. And what they found made even seasoned investigators go quiet. There were drag marks on the carpet, discolorations, pressure indentations, fabric depressions. Something heavy had been inside. Something long, something shaped like bodies. Experts studied the imprints, measured length, measured width. They matched the size of children. All three. But still, no bodies, no DNA, nothing to officially confirm. Just enough to chill every investigator to the bone. Meanwhile, John continued to talk, and every word made it worse. He said the group didn't want the boys found. He said he saved them from their mother. He said the courts were corrupt. He said Tanya was dangerous. He said the boys would understand someday. Detectives listened, not because they believed him, but because every lie was a thread. Every thread led to truth. Every truth led to evidence. They let him talk until he ran out of breath. Then they presented the map. "This is where you drove," Wallace said. John stared, expressionless. "This is where you stopped." "Nothing." "This is how long you stayed at each location." John's breathing grew shallow. "This is where you turned around." Still nothing. "And this?" Wallace said, tapping the screen. is where we believe you disposed of your sons." At those words, John's face twitched. Just for a second. A tiny second. But detectives saw it. A crack. A fracture. A break in the mask. Guilt leaking out. The next lie John told came from desperation. "I didn't hurt them," he whispered. "I gave them away so they wouldn't suffer." Detective Wallace leaned forward. "Then why do the boys' clothes still hang in their closets?" John looked away. "Why were their beds untouched?" Silence. "Why did your phone ping in isolated areas at 3 a.m.? No answer. "Why did you lie about every detail?" Nothing. "Why, John?" And that's when John said the line that destroyed any sympathy investigators might have had left. "I can't say that. Not I don't know. Not I didn't do anything. Not I'm innocent. I can't say." Those words were everything. Those words told the truth he wouldn't admit. Those words told investigators what they already believed. The boys were gone. Gone forever. And their father knew exactly where they were. Meanwhile, the search expanded. Hundreds of volunteers. Search dogs. Drones. Helicopters. ATVs. But there were no footprints. No clothing scraps. No backpacks. No tracks. No objects. It was like the boys had disappeared off Earth. But investigators knew better. People don't vanish. Bodies don't evaporate. Clothes don't dissolve. Somewhere across Michigan, the boys existed. And John was the only person alive who knew where. As days passed, the community turned into a storm. Anger, fear, sorrow. People wanted answers. People wanted justice. People wanted John to break. He didn't. He stayed in his cell, eating, sleeping, staring at the wall. No remorse. No humanity. No regret. The one person who cried the loudest was Tanya. She sobbed until her voice cracked. She screamed until she collapsed. She begged until she could no longer speak. She begged John to talk. Begged him to reveal something. Anything. But he didn't. He refused. He let her drown in grief. He watched her break. And he said nothing. Then something changed. A new witness came forward. The courtroom door swung open. And for the first time in nearly 15 years, John Skelton walked into a hearing where he was no longer the strange father who gave strange answers. No longer the bitter ex-husband hiding behind a story about keeping his kids safe. He was now something else. A man charged with murdering his 3 sons. The air felt tight the moment he entered. Reporters leaned forward. Family members held their breath. Even the deputies watched him differently, as if seeing a man stripped of every excuse he had ever tried to hide behind. He walked slowly, quietly, almost like he was studying everyone watching him. His hands were cuffed, but his face looked calm. Too calm. "Mr. Skelton, do you understand the charges against you?" Skelton nodded once. Tiny movement, barely visible, but heavy enough to shake the room. He understood. He was being accused of murdering Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner. 3 boys who never made it home. 3 boys who vanished on Thanksgiving weekend of 2010. 3 boys their father claimed were with a group of unknown people. A lie that turned into a legend. A lie that dragged on for more than a decade. A lie that held 3 families hostage. The boys' mother, their grandparents, their friends, the grown-ups they should have become. Everyone, piece by piece, because the investigation had shifted. Quietly, patiently, methodically, detectives had never stopped. Even when the trail went cold. Even when tips dried up. Even when leads collapsed into nothing. And now, the truth, or something very close to it, was beginning to surface. The judge continued. "This court notes that your next appearance is scheduled for November 24th, 2025. A date that suddenly felt enormous. A date that felt like the end of something long, painful, and dark. To the moment everything changed. It happened when a new prosecutor took a fresh look at the old case file. More than 30,000 pages of interviews, phone logs, analysis, maps, inconsistencies, and cold details that once overwhelmed investigators. Something stood out. Something everyone had overlooked. Something that didn't fit any of John Skelton's stories. A detail so simple yet so big that it reopened everything. But this chapter isn't about that detail. Not yet. This chapter is about what happened after Skelton was arrested again. After investigators finally had enough to lock him in a cell he couldn't walk away from. And after the world learned how many secrets can hide behind a quiet man in a small town. John, do you know why we're here? Skelton stared at the wall. Seconds passed. Long seconds. Then he said, I tried to save them. Save who? Save them from what? Save them where? He didn't say. He stopped speaking. That was the last thing he said that day. They had spent years building something much stronger than suspicion. Something built on timeline analysis, cell tower data, vehicle movement, behavior patterns, contradictions in statements, new forensic tools that didn't exist in 2010. And the one thing that haunts cases like this, statements that change each time they're told. Skelton had rewritten his story so many times it became unrecognizable. First, he claimed he gave the boys to an organization, then a group of women, then a sanctuary, then a group that protects children. Then he said he couldn't say more. Every version changed. Every version broke apart. Every version contradicted the last. Not because she didn't care. She cared too much. She stayed quiet because grief doesn't fade with time. It hardens. It grows roots. Takes up space in every room you walk into. She once said, I think he knows exactly where they are. He just won't tell us. That sentence followed her everywhere. It followed investigators too. It became the compass that guided the entire case. Skelton stood there, staring straight ahead. Not at the prosecutor. Not at the judge. Not at the crowd. Just forward, like he was bracing himself against a storm only he could see. His attorney whispered something into his ear. Skelton didn't react. He didn't blink. He didn't frown. He didn't show fear. Just that same blank calmness he had shown when he was first interviewed 15 years ago. Detectives had described his demeanor back then as detached, emotionless, flat, like someone who didn't fully understand the gravity of what was happening. Today, nothing had changed. She spoke slowly. Your Honor, the state intends to pursue this case as a homicide investigation involving multiple victims who were minors. The evidence gathered over the last several years supports these charges. Additional forensic material has been reevaluated with modern technology. Her voice steadied. The state is prepared to proceed. Prepared. That word echoed across the room. Prepared meant more than people realized. Prepared meant new analysis, new science, new testimony, new digital reconstruction, new leads that finally led somewhere. Prepared also meant they have enough, or they believe they do, and belief when backed by evidence is terrifying, especially for the accused. For the first time in the hearing, something shifted. Not in his body, in the room itself, because everyone knew what was coming next. The prosecutor listed the charges, one by one. 3 counts of murder, 3 children, 3 lives gone, and 1 man who still refused to explain what happened. She continued, these children did not walk away. They did not run away. They did not leave of their own free will. They were taken. And the only person who had access to them, opportunity, motive, and exclusive control was the defendant. Defense counsel objected. The judge overruled. The prosecutor finished. The state believes the evidence will prove this beyond a reasonable doubt. Mr. Skelton, do you wish to make any statements at this time? He shook his head. Just once. Just enough. No, Your Honor. His voice sounded hollow, tired, faded. The kind of voice belonging to a man who had been carrying something heavy for far too long. But was that guilt? Or was it something else? No one knew. Not yet. But they would. Soon. The kind that can destroy a man's story. The kind that can rewrite everything we thought we knew. The kind that can turn a disappearance into a homicide. And a mystery into a truth. Cameras flashed. Microphones pointed in every direction. Questions collided in the air like sparks. What changed in the case? Why now? Is there new forensic evidence? Will Skelton get a plea deal? Do investigators believe the boys are deceased? Will there be a recovery search? No official answers. Not yet. Just this. We believe we can prove our case. A sentence that chilled everyone who heard it. A whiteboard was filled with maps, dates, call logs, travel routes, statements, contradictions, photos of the three boys. Their faces seemed to look back at the room itself, as if asking, "What took so long?" One detective whispered, "This is the closest we've ever been." Another replied, "We can't miss this time." They had waited years for this moment. Now they were racing against the calendar. The next hearing was coming fast, and with it, a spotlight brighter than anything this case had seen since 2010. They knew the world was about to watch, and judge, and demand answers, real answers. Skelton's calmness wasn't confidence. It was resignation, the look of a man who finally realized the door he always managed to slip through was closing, for good. There was one thing still missing, the one thing investigators needed more than anything. Short sentences, high tension, unbroken suspense. The final chapter, 15 years. 15 years of silence. 15 years of theories. 15 years of a father hiding behind lies that twisted so many times they formed a maze no one could escape. But now the maze had an opening. A small one, a narrow one, but enough. Enough for the truth to slip through. The detail that cracked the case didn't come from a dramatic confession. It didn't come from a witness suddenly remembering something. It didn't come from a new sighting or a surprising tip. It came from something much simpler. A timestamp. One small timestamp buried in a stack of digital data from 2010. A timestamp investigators had seen 100 times. A timestamp that didn't matter back then because technology wasn't what it is today. But now it mattered. Now it changed everything. Because that timestamp proved one thing. John Skelton lied about where he was. And if he lied about where he was, he lied about everything else. They used old cell tower records, new geolocation software, updated algorithmic reconstruction, vehicle pattern analysis, signal drift, mapping, rural range correction, timeline sequencing. All tools that didn't exist in 2010. Tools that gave them something they had never been able to see. A clear, precise, minute-by-minute path of where John Skelton went the night his three children disappeared. The truth stunned the room. His phone, the one he claimed was off, pinged twice. Not in town. Not near his home. Not near the fantasy organization he insisted he handed the boys to. Pinged in a rural area just outside Morenci. Place with no house, no neighbors, no lights, just land. Land that stretched into fields. Fields that stretched into woods. Woods that swallowed anything left inside them. The team froze as the map loaded. It formed a narrow path. A lonely path. Path away from home. Away from safety. A path only one person traveled that night. John Skelton. But he didn't travel alone. The boys were with him. This is it. 2 words. 2 words that broke a 15-year wall. 2 words that forced everyone to confront the unthinkable. They replayed the reconstructed timeline. Watched the small digital dot move across the map. Watched the moments line up with the lies. Every lie cracked. Every lie shattered. Every lie circled back to one chilling truth. There was no organization. No group. No handoff. No protection. No escape. There was just one man. One vehicle. One night. And 3 boys who never saw morning. Something investigators had long suspected but could never prove. A neighbor's security camera, one that recorded grainy footage back in 2010, had been sent to a forensic video lab. A lab that had tools unheard of 15 years ago. Footage that once looked like shadows and noise suddenly became clearer. Not perfect, not crisp, but enough. Faint silhouette, a figure opening the vehicle door. A heavy object lifted and placed inside. 3 times. 3. Investigators paused the frame, zoomed, cleaned the image, stabilized it. The shape was small, the size consistent with a child. 3 movements. 3 silhouettes, taken at 4:08 a.m., and none of them were moving. A conference room with plain walls and heavy silence. The lead prosecutor asked the question everyone already knew the answer to. Can we prove they are deceased? A detective responded, not directly, but we can prove something else. She leaned forward. The boys could not have survived what happened that night. The prosecutor nodded slowly. Then we move forward. And just like that, the case shifted from missing persons to homicide. 15 years after the disappearance. 15 years after the last known sighting. 15 years after the father claimed he saved them. The truth walked into the room with them, and the truth wasn't kind. The door closed behind him. The metal echoed across the block. He sat on the thin mattress, hands folded, eyes blank. For the first time since 2010, he asked a guard a question. When is my next hearing? The guard told him. November 24th. Skelton nodded. The guard paused. You know they have new evidence, right? Skelton didn't answer. He just stared at the wall. A wall he had stared at for years. A wall that never answered him back. And then he whispered something. So quietly the guard almost missed it. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. Like what? He didn't say. He didn't explain. He didn't continue. He turned his head, looked at the small window, looked at the fading light, then closed his eyes, like a man remembering something he wished he could forget, or something he wished he never had to face again. They needed more confirmation, more context, more foundation for trial. So they deepened the search. They brought in soil analysts, drone imaging specialists, environmental reconstruction experts, psychological profilers, digital forensics engineers. All of them asked the same question. What happened to the boys? One expert, a forensic soil scientist, found something important. Soil samples from Skelton's minivan carpet. Samples collected back in 2010. Samples that had never been fully analyzed. Because the technology didn't exist back then. Now it did. And the results were impossible to ignore. The soil didn't come from town. Didn't come from the house. Didn't come from any place Skelton claimed he visited. It came from the same rural location where his phone pinged. A place he swore he never went. A place that matched the reconstructed path. A place that swallowed secrets. Skelton's behavior pattern. His emotional flatness. His repeated excuses. His inconsistent storytelling. His obsession with protecting the boys from their mother. His sudden dive into radical belief systems shortly before the disappearance. His fixation on removing the boys from her custody at any cost. The profiler didn't hesitate. This was not a rescue. This was not a protection mission. This was an act of control driven by resentment and desperation. Resentment, desperation, control. The three ingredients that destroy families. And in this case, destroyed 3 little boys. The official charging summary. And the summary changed everything. Because it listed the reason prosecutors believe they can prove homicide. A reason the public hadn't heard before. A reason that made Skelton's calm face in the courtroom suddenly feel monstrous. It said, evidence indicates the children were deceased prior to the time the defendant claims they were transferred to a third party. In one sentence, it stripped away every lie, every excuse, every story, every fantasy group, every false hope, confirmed what investigators feared, what the mother always believed, what the public suspected, what the silence screamed. They were gone before the lie even began. The piece that started it all. The phone ping, the rural location, the dark road, the unlit fields, a place where no one goes at that hour, a place where a father should never be with 3 sleeping children, a place that connected to everything else. The timestamp proved he was there. The soil proved the boys were there. The video proved he lifted something into the car. The inconsistent stories proved he was hiding something. The timeline reconstruction proved he was alone with them the entire time. And the experts proved what everyone dreaded. There was no scenario, none, where the boys could have survived what happened that night. But it was finally here. 15 years later. The truth that investigators had chased in circles. The truth the mother cried for. For more chilling true crime stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel.